All right, I'm Sean Armstrong, also known as the Super Gringo, and this is Shawn Thinking Out Loud. If you're new here, here's what you've stumbled into. I'm an American living in Brazil, still voting in American elections, still watching the slow-motion train wreck of American politics, and using this show to say the things you're not supposed to say out loud in polite company. We talk about socialism and communism, the destruction of the constitutional republic, foreign policy, massive government waste, cultural insanity, and the way the media tries to convince you that up is down and stupid is smart. Sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's funny, but it's always blunt. I'm not here to be your therapist. I'm here to make you think, and occasionally to roast a loony left until they reach for the emoji of doom and prove my point for me. You'll hear me pull from my books, my army background, and the fact that I actually read this stuff instead of just repeating memes. By the way, if you want the long-form version of a lot of what I talk about here, you can find my books under Super Gringo Books on Amazon and Google Play, titles like Bloodstained Banner, Dismantling the Republic, From Jobs to Justice, Understanding Capitalism, and the rest of the catalog. And as always, you can send in your questions during the week. Politics, economics, war, Brazil, whatever you're trying to figure out, I read them, I pull the good ones, and I'll do my best to answer them in future episodes. So if you're ready for straight talk, no corporate script, and no leftist babysitters, let's get started. This is Shawn Thinking Out Loud.
Welcome to the noise in my head, where ideas spark like lightning threads. No script, no map, just let it flow. Thinking out loud, let's see where we go. Welcome to the noise in my head, where ideas spark like lightning threads. No script, no map, just let it flow. Thinking out loud, let's see where we go.
All right, a bunch of you have asked, or at least implied in the comments, Shawn, what's with the Star-Spangled Banner and the giant American flag in your show opener? You don't even live in the States anymore. So let's talk about that. First reason is simple. I'm still an American. My mailing address changed. My passport did not. I live in Brazil, but I can still vote in American elections. I still pay attention to American policy, and if the United States calls up the retired reserve, I know exactly which flag is on my shoulder. That anthem and that flag aren't a background decoration. They're a statement. I didn't stop being an American just because I got on a plane. Second reason, because it absolutely scrambles the brain of a certain corner of the left. They see the U.S. flag, they hear a guy defending capitalism, calling out socialism, roasting their cult politics. Then they find out I'm sitting in Ariquemes, Rondônia, Brazil, drinking Brazilian coffee, teaching English, and they short circuit. Wait, you live somewhere else, but you still love America? And you're not spending every waking minute apologizing for it? Yes, correct. In their heads, if you move away, you're supposed to become this bitter, self-loathing expat who spends all day posting about how awful the U.S. is. Instead, I'm the opposite. I live in another country, and it actually makes me more grateful for what America is good at. Rule of law when it works, a constitution that still means something if we bother to defend it. The fact that I can sit here in Brazil and still cast a ballot that counts in an American election, that's not normal in human history. Third reason I keep the flag and anthem, perspective. I joke about this, but it's true. I happen to live in a place where fourth-wave feminism and a steady diet of fast food have not completely wrecked the dating culture. The women here still expect you to be a man, not a permanent emotional support project. They cook, they value family, they're not spending all day doom-scrolling TikTok trying to diagnose themselves with a new personality disorder every week. And you know what that contrast does? It reminds me how much cultural damage we've done back home with bad ideas. Not because America is evil, but because we've let every fashionable ideology run wild and call it progress. So when that flag comes up at the start of the show, it's saying two things at once. One, America is still worth loving, defending, and reforming instead of burning to the ground. And two, I can sit in Brazil and look back at my own country and tell the truth about what's working and what's falling apart without having to pretend I'm above it all because I've got a different zip code now. If that triggers the loony left, good, because the flag isn't theirs. It doesn't belong to politicians. It doesn't belong to activists. It sure doesn't belong to the crowd that only remembers they love America when they can use a dead soldier to attack a president they already hated. It belongs to the people who served under it, worked under it, paid into it, and still believe a constitutional republic is better than the alternatives. I write about it in books like Bloodstained Banner and Dismantling the Republic. By the way, if you want the long-form version of why I'm so hard on socialism, central planning, and the people trying to hollow out the republic, go check out Bloodstained Banner, Socialism, Capitalism, and the Myth of the Nordic Model, and Dismantling the Republic, the Role of Progressive Elites in America's Descent into Tribalism. They're on Amazon, Google Play, and I break the arguments down chapter by chapter, not just in YouTube sound bites. So yeah, the anthem stays, the flag stays. I'm still an American. I just happen to live in a country where the women haven't been completely reprogrammed by TikTok and gender studies TED Talks. And that contrast makes me appreciate the best parts of America and fight harder against the worst ideas trying to tear it down. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. This is Shawn Thinking Out Loud. All right, let's talk about the left's full-body meltdown over Donald Trump getting the FIFA Peace Medal. Because apparently we now live in a world where FIFA, the same organization that brought you Qatar, corruption scandals, and slave-built stadiums, hands Trump a peace award, and the internet acts like the Four Horsemen just checked into Mar-a-Lago. So, here are the facts. FIFA rolled out a new peace prize, a FIFA Peace Medal to recognize individuals for extraordinary actions for peace. Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, has been on record for years calling Trump a champion of world peace while they work together on the 2026 World Cup in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Trump shows up, takes the medal, puts it on, and thanks FIFA. End of story, right? Nope. That's just the opening bell. Within minutes, left-wing Twitter, Reddit, late-night comedy, and the usual blue check crowd were having a synchronized nervous breakdown. Post calling it fake peace prize, participation trophy for dictators, the golden butt plug of world football, and my personal favorite, he had to put it on himself, even FIFA wouldn't touch it. Same script over and over. It's meaningless, it's embarrassing, it's not a real peace prize. FIFA is disgraced. He bought it himself. They made it up for him because he'll never get a Nobel. You would think Trump personally strangled a dove on the 50-yard line at the World Cup. Let's start with the obvious contrast no one on the left wants to talk about. Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 before he'd even finished packing his boxes in the White House. The Nobel Committee literally said they gave it to him for his hope and vision, not for anything he'd actually done. Then what happened? Under Obama, the drone war expanded across multiple countries, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, with thousands of strikes and hundreds of civilian deaths, even by the U.S. government's own conservative estimates, and much higher numbers from independent watchdogs. Nobel? No problem, totally deserved. Media? Bold, complexed, nuanced foreign policy. Trump gets a peace medal from FIFA partly because he pushed Middle East normalization deals and partly because he helped secure and promote a massive global sports event without starting new wars, and suddenly it's the end of civilization. So let's be clear. Obama gets a preemptive, aspirational peace prize while expanding drone campaigns and kinetic ops. Trump gets a symbolic peace medal from a sports body, and they're acting like FIFA just knighted Genghis Khan. If you didn't melt down over the first one, spare me your moral panic over the second. This isn't about FIFA. Nobody ranting on Reddit suddenly discovered a deep concern for governance at world football's governing body. If it were Bernie Sanders getting the medal, they'd call it a powerful moment for peace and justice. This is about one thing. They cannot psychologically process Trump getting any symbol of legitimacy from any institution for any reason. That's Trump unacceptance and resistance disorder in real time. You see it in the language. He bought it himself. Fake peace prize. Like giving a toddler a toy so he stops crying. They just can't say, weird award, whatever. They need it to be meaningless, illegitimate, rigged, and humiliating. Not because they care what FIFA does, but because it breaks their internal rule. Trump must only ever fail. He must never win. He must never be praised, even by people we already thought were corrupt. As I argue in From Jobs to Justice, the Trump era examined, the modern left doesn't just oppose Trump politically. They treat any positive outcome under him as a personal insult, something that has to be explained away, downgraded or erased so they don't have to rethink anything they believe. Now, let's talk about FIFA for a second. This is the same FIFA that was hammered for corruption and bribery scandals, banned officials, and a World Cup in Qatar built on the backs of exploited migrant workers. The left already thought FIFA was dirty long before Trump touched that metal. So if you really believe FIFA is a corrupt, corporate, human rights denying mess, then why do you care what they do with a piece of metal? If FIFA is corrupt, then nothing they do should have moral weight, including handing Trump a trinket. But here's what happens instead. When FIFA does something they like, they treat it as the global community speaking. When FIFA gives Trump anything, suddenly it's a fake, bought and paid for disgrace that doesn't count. That's not principle, that's tribalism with a logo. Now, you can love or hate Trump's style. You can hate the tweets, the rallies, the whole package. But on the peace question, let's talk outcomes, not feelings. Under Trump, no new major wars. The so-called Caliphate of ISIS was destroyed as a territorial entity. The Abraham Accords normalized relations between Israel and several Arab states. For a long stretch, no U.S. service member was killed in combat in Afghanistan. You don't have to like how he did it, but pretending that record is indistinguishable from constant escalation and regime change addiction is just dishonest. As I lay out in The Evolution of American Foreign Policy, Trump's foreign policy was often loud and chaotic on the surface, but far more restrained in terms of large-scale deployments than many of his predecessors. So when FIFA says, hey, this guy helped avoid major wars, backed normalization deals, and kept the 2026 World Cup hosts out of open conflict, that's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. You can still say FIFA is cringe, this award is odd, but to melt down like he stole the Nobel out of Obama's nightstand is pure emotion. The funniest part of all this is watching the same people who screamed, "War criminal!" accused Trump of starting World War III, declared Hegseth a monster for hitting narco-terrorist boats, turn around and say, "See, a peace medal proves nothing. He's still evil." Exactly. Awards don't change facts. You know what does? Wars you did or didn't start. Deals you did or didn't sign. Soldiers who did or didn't die. Every Facebook lawyer who spent the last 3 years calling him a war criminal based on a CNN push alert is now suddenly a purist about the integrity of peace prizes. Oh, that medal doesn't count. The Nobel is the real one. The Nobel Committee that preemptively blessed Obama with the drone campaign expanded? That one? Got it. So let's call this what it is. Trump getting the FIFA Peace Medal does not make him a saint. Obama getting the Nobel Peace Prize did not make him a saint. Both are political, symbolic awards handed out by institutions trying to, by influence, burnish their own brand and attach themselves to power. The difference is how people react. On the left, Obama's Nobel was treated as sacred, even as the policy record got bloodier. Trump's FIFA medal is treated as a cosmic injustice, even with a foreign policy record that looks, on paper, a lot less trigger-happy than they've been telling you. If you're going to be consistent, you either skeptically side-eye all peace prizes or admit your outrages about the man, not the medal. So, yeah. Donald Trump got a FIFA Peace Medal, and the left responded like he carved Nobel into it with a Sharpie and forced them all to hang it on their mantle. Meanwhile, I'm over here looking at the bigger picture. What actually happened under each president? Who started what war? Who expanded which campaign? Who normalized which relationships? And why does a participation trophy from FIFA matter more to some people than dead civilians, dead soldiers, or actual treaties? If a soccer bureaucracy giving Trump a medal hurts you more than 13 Americans killed at Abbey Gate, or a National Guard soldier shot near the White House by a man we never should have cleared, your priorities are upside down. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. If you've got questions on this, on foreign policy, on peace prizes, or on why FIFA is suddenly the high council of morality, send them in during the week. I'll do my best to hit them in a future episode of Shawn Thinking Out Loud. If you want long-form version with citations, history, and actual numbers, you can check out my books From Jobs to Justice, the Trump Era Examined, and The Evolution of American Foreign Policy, From Isolationism to Global Engagement, anywhere Super Gringo books are sold. All right, let me tell you what made me stop and go, yeah, something is really wrong with the way we think in this country. I've got 2 big courses up on YouTube right now. One is about socialism, communism, and the Nordic myth, based on my book, Bloodstained Banner, Socialism, Capitalism, and the Myth of the Nordic Model. The other is about the destruction of the American constitutional republic, based on Dismantling the Republic, the role of progressive elites in America's descent into tribalism. Guess which one people are fired up about? Not the one about dismantling the republic. Not the one about how the elites are hollowing out our rights. No. They're mad at me for being mean to socialism and communism. That's the problem in one sentence. So here's what happens. I drop a full course, modules, lessons, the whole thing. Module 2, the Scandinavian myth. Are Nordic countries really socialist? Module 6, social democracy and mixed economies. Is there a sane middle ground? I'm laying out why central planning fails, why every socialist experiment ends in shortages, repression, or both, and then I go on to ask whether your beloved Nordic model is actually socialism at all, or just capitalism with a large safety net. In Bloodstained Banner, I put it bluntly. There isn't a single successful example of socialism or communism anywhere on earth that stands up to scrutiny. That's the whole point of the course. Show the failure of the pure systems first, then test the so-called middle ground. And what do I get in the comments? One guy basically says, this video didn't really address mixed economies or a middle ground. It's just a critique of central planning. Fair point on that one. That one module. That module is supposed to be a hard shot at central planning. The mixed economy discussion is in module 6. But that's not what really sticks out. What sticks out is this. Nobody is mad that I'm teaching a course called Dismantling the Republic, the Role of Progressive Elites in America's Descent into Tribalism. Not one comment. Not one, hey, maybe we should talk about how the constitutional framework is being gutted. They scroll right past, hey, your republic is being hollowed out from the inside, and slam the brakes at, did you just scrutinize socialism? Then I get a Scandinavian viewer who's actually pretty thoughtful. He says, look, from a U.S. standpoint, I can see why your explanation has merit. We don't call ourselves socialist. We've got some state-owned utilities, some municipal control, and when you put myth in the title, I feel a little attacked. Fair enough. That's at least an honest reaction. Then he adds very politely, the start of your video made me laugh. Marching sounds, dead PowerPoint slides, and then this hopeless background of closets with your face sitting in the middle of half the screen. You can do better than that. He's not wrong. I do have an army background. The intro sounds like a battalion is about to come through your speakers, and the backdrop is high-end Walmart storage solutions. But here's the part that really hits me. He's more concerned about the vibe of the production than the fact that one whole course is about how progressive elites are dismantling the system that protects his rights. We've reached this weird point where the aesthetics of the YouTube background matter more than the erosion of checks and balances. The tone of my critique of socialism upsets people more than the content of my warning about a dying republic. And then you get the upload police. This video didn't address the things in the title or description. Also, what's up with dumping hundreds of videos at once? Let me translate that. I accidentally clicked on a full college-style course built off a book you wrote, and I'm mad you didn't spoon-feed me everything in one 10-minute rant. I'm taking full-length books and turning them into structured playlists. Bloodstained Banner on socialism versus capitalism, Dismantling the Republic on how elites are hollowing out America, and somehow the scandal is I uploaded too much education at once. You don't have to watch them all. You don't have to agree. But being triggered because there's too much content on economics, history, and political structure tells me everything I need to know about where the culture is. Here's what really bothers me. If I do a tight, savage roast on socialism, the comments light up. If I say the word communism, people show up for 6 time zones away to defend their favorite label. But when I say your constitutional republic is being dismantled, Your separation of power is being bypassed. Your administrative state is writing a law you never voted on. Your elections are increasingly tribal rather than constitutional. Silence. No curiosity, no outrage. No demand for more. We are more emotionally attached to defending the reputation of socialism and communism than we are to defending the structure that lets us argue about it in the first place. That's backwards. In Bloodstained Banner, I hammer this point. Socialism and communism don't fail because the wrong people tried it. They fail because centralizing power, information, and resource allocation turns every noble slogan into coercion and scarcity. In Dismantling the Republic, I argue, we're not flipping to communism overnight, we're rotting from within. Courts that defer agencies instead of the Constitution. Bureaucracies that act like they're the real legislature. Cultural elites that train you to think in tribes, not in principles. So when you get outraged at my tone on socialism, but shrug at the idea that the Republic is being hollowed out, you're proving the thesis. You're emotionally loyal to the brand and numb to the foundation falling apart under your feet. Quick side note, since people keep asking, yes, these courses are built off my books. If you actually want the full argument with structure, examples, and citations, you can grab Bloodstained Banner, Socialism, Capitalism, and the Myth of Nordic Model, and Dismantling the Republic, the Role of Progressive Elites in America's Descent into Tribalism. They're on Amazon under Super Gringo Books. The YouTube playlists are the free classroom version. You don't have to buy anything, but if you're going to critique, at least engage with the full argument, not just the marching intro and my closet doors. Here's where I land. If you're mad at me for saying there isn't a single successful example of socialism or communism anywhere on earth that stands up to scrutiny, but you're not bothered at all by a course that methodically lays out how the American Republic is being stripped down for parts, the problem is not my rhetoric. The problem is the culture you've been marinating in. You've been trained to defend systems that always fail and ignore the system that, for all its flaws, gave you more freedom and prosperity than 99% of human history. So yeah, I believe something is very wrong in America when more people are offended by my critique of socialism and communism than by the argument that our constitutional republic is being dismantled in front of them. If that stings a little, good. It means you're still capable of feeling something about what actually matters. You're listening to Shawn Thinking Out Loud. If you've got questions about the courses about socialism versus capitalism, or about what I mean by dismantling the republic, send them in during the week. I do go through them, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can in future episodes. And if you want the long-form, book-length version of what we're talking about here, you already know where to find it. Bloodstained Banner and Dismantling the Republic. That's the spine of this whole project. You know, people always ask me, Shawn, where actually are you in Brazil? Sao Paulo? Rio? Beach with palm trees? No, try again. I live in Ariquemes in the state of Rondônia in the north of Brazil. If you look at the map, it's the part where most Americans still think, isn't that just Amazon jungle and a couple of parrots? Let me paint a picture for you. Ariquemes is the main city of Vale do Jaguaribe, about 200 kilometers from Porto Velho, the state capital, out in the central north of Rondônia. It's not a megacity, it's not a village, it's that sweet spot in the middle, big enough to have universities, hospitals, and traffic that can actually annoy you, small enough that you can still run into the same faces in the bakery, the gas station, and the Sunday feira. The name Ariquemes comes from Ariqueme people, an indigenous group that lived here long before anyone drew borders on a map, speaking in Japacari Kara language in the wider Tupi family. The city itself is young. It was founded in the municipality in 1977, part of the big wave of colonization settlement projects and Go West development in Brazilian interior. In other words, where I live is younger than a lot of people's cars. This used to be dense forest, in Hospita Selva, as the Brazilians say. Today, it's one of the largest cities in the state, laid out as a planned city with straight avenues, roundabouts, and neighborhoods that didn't just grow by accident over 200 years. You can still feel the frontier DNA in the place, a mix of settlers, small farmers, ranchers, shop owners, truck drivers, and students, all jammed into one regional hub. Economically, Ariquemes is not a theory town. It's cattle, it's agriculture, it's mining. The city's primary economy is driven by livestock, especially beef, and the extraction of cassiterite, a tin ore that helped fuel the region's growth. You see it in the traffic, pickup trucks, motorcycles, and grain trucks. You see it in the landscape, pasture, patches of forest, rivers cutting through the heat. And speaking of heat, let's talk climate. Rondônia is equatorial, hot, humid. You get a rainy season where the sky just opens up and dumps water on you every afternoon, and a dry season where it's still hot, but now the dust wants to turn. The Köppen classification calls it an equatorial climate, a lot of heat, a lot of humidity, and maybe a short dry window to catch your breath. This isn't resort brochure Brazil. This is real people trying to make a live in Brazil. On one street, you'll see a brand new SUV. On the next, a guy hauling lumber on a bike that probably should have retired 10 years ago. Evangelical churches on almost every corner, small businesses stacked one after another, farm supply, a cell phone repair, motorcycle parts, boot shops, snack stands. And in the middle of it all, that a legal immigrant from New York teaching English, writing books, and watching the world argue on the internet about socialism and capitalism like they're fantasy football teams. By the way, a quick reminder, if you've got questions about any of this, about Brazil, about Ariquemes, about the economy, about politics, whatever it is, you can send them in during the week. I read as many as I can, and I'll do my best to answer them on future episodes of Shawn Thinking Out Loud. Now, here's why Ariquemes matters for what I talk about on the show. It's one thing to argue about socialism from a Starbucks in a U.S. suburb. It's another thing to live in a frontier city in the Brazilian interior where government policy and economic reality collide in real time. You see what happens when the state tries to manage everything. You see what happens when it neglects basic infrastructure but loves bureaucracy. You see how hard people have to work just to keep moving forward under layers of regulation, taxes, and political games they never voted for. That's why I wrote Bloodstained Banner, Socialism, Capitalism, and the Myth of the Nordic Model, and turned it into a whole course. I've watched, up close, what happens when people fall in love with big promises and forget to look at the bill. Living in Ariquemes makes it impossible to treat those questions like a college debate club exercise. Here, you can see the cost in roads, in hospitals, in schools, and in what's on the grocery shelves. At the same time, the city is full of people who get up early, work late, and still find time for a churrasco on the weekend, for church on Sunday, for helping a neighbor who's having a hard time. There's a resilience here that you don't pick up from Twitter threads. It's the resilience of families who left everything behind to carve out a life in a place that didn't exist on a map when their parents were born. So, when you hear me on this podcast talk about the destruction of the constitutional republic, about globalism, about elites, about socialism and communism, I'm not saying it from a comfortable DC office. I'm saying it from Ariquemes, Rondônia, a city that grew out of jungle and settlement projects, where people still feel the weight of every bad decision made thousands of miles away. And if you want a deeper dive into how all of that ties together, Brazil, the U.S., socialism, capitalism, tribalism, that's exactly why I wrote the series around Dismantling the Republic, the role of progressive elites in America's descent into tribalism, and Understanding Capitalism, the dynamic dance of market forces and human behavior. You can grab the books or watch the free course versions on my channel if you'd rather learn with a screen than a page, but I wanted you to know where I'm sitting when I record this. Not in New York, not in D.C., not in L.A., in a hot, humid frontier city in the Brazilian Amazon built on cattle, tin, sweat, and a whole lot of stubborn hope. That's Ariquemes. That's home. All right, let me pull the curtain back a little bit, because I know some of you are probably wondering, where does this guy get all this information? And why does he do this every single day? Short answer, it's kind of compulsive. Long answer, I learned it in the Army. Very early on, I had a very smart sergeant, Vietnam veteran, look me dead in the eye and say, "Armstrong, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know where to find everything." That stuck. In the Army, there was a stock answer you were allowed to give. "I don't know, sir, but I will find out." Not, "I don't know, full stop." Not, "Let me guess." "I don't know, sir, but I will find out." And then the important part. You got up and you went and found out. Somewhere along the line, I just skipped the first half and kept the second. Now, I have this tendency to go find out before anyone even asks. That's most of what you see me doing now. I ask the questions before someone tries to hit me with them. A lot of the questions I answer on this podcast, in my books, on YouTube, came from somebody's attempted gotcha. Some angry commenter, some college professor, some loony leftist trying to back me into a corner, and I remembered it. Because here's the dirty little secret. These cultists ask the same questions, make the same comments, throw the same insults over and over again. Once you've heard it the 10th time, you realize, okay, I don't need to be surprised by this anymore. I can go build an answer once and keep it. That's why I've written at this point around 40 books. Most of them are either built out of real interactions with the loony left or built out of college courses where I took the lecture notes, cleaned them up, and turned them into something you can actually read. I literally wrote a book on how to learn by writing a book. The method is simple, and you can steal it. Step 1, ask questions. Write them down. Step 2, go find the answers. Not just one article, but multiple sources, different angles. Step 3, write down your answers in your own words. Step 4, put them in paragraph form. Organize them, clean them up. Congratulations, you're holding a book. And more importantly, you've actually learned the topic you were writing about. You didn't just consume content, you wrestled with it, sorted it, and pinned it to the page. And here's the bonus. When you do it that way, you don't just have opinions, you have sources. At the back of that book, you've now got a built-in reference section. So the next time someone comes at you with the same question or the same bad argument, you don't have to start from scratch. You go back to your own work, your notes, your bibliography, and you can say, page and line, here's the answer, here's the source. That's what I do. I ask questions before the internet asks them. I build answers before the next wave of cultists show up, and I turn that work into books, into courses, and into episodes like this one. By the way, if you have questions about politics, economics, theology, Brazil, military stuff, whatever it is, you can send them in during the week. I do read them, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can here on Shawn Thinking Out Loud. And yes, since we're talking about that whole process, is why there are so many titles with my name on the cover. If you want to see this learn by writing thing in action, those books are basically public notebooks with the rough edges cleaned off. You get the arguments, the structure, the sources. I use when people want to go deeper than a Facebook thread. I'm trying to add some different flavors to this podcast now. Not just, here's what the loony left did today and why it's dumb. Even though, let's be honest, they still give me plenty of material. They're still going to be a mention. They're just not the whole point. Because underneath the roasts, there's a method. Ask good questions, go find real answers, write them down, use them again. That's where I get my information. That's why I do it. It started with one old sergeant telling a young soldier, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know where to find everything. I took that seriously. You're hearing the result. All right, let's talk about something that's been bugging me ever since I moved to Brazil. There is no such thing as an African American. There are Americans. Period. Now, calm down, breathe. I didn't say there's no such thing as Africa. I didn't say there's no such thing as black people. I said the label is dumb. Half the people screaming African American have never set foot in Africa. Most of them couldn't find it on a map without Google Maps and a tutor and 3 lifelines. That would be like me living here in Brazil, getting my Brazilian citizenship and saying, I'm a Brazilian American. No, I'd be Brazilian. If I kept my U.S. passport too, I could say I'm American and Brazilian. Or I have dual citizenship. That makes sense. But Brazilian American? American Brazilian? Nobody here talks like that. They just look at me and go, cara você é doida. Dude, you're crazy. We're the only country on earth that insists on stacking adjectives on top of, in front of the word American until it looks like a CVS receipt. African American, Asian American, Latino X hyphen ampersand American. At some point, you're not describing identity, you're just doing Scrabble. And here's what living overseas taught me. When people here talk about Americans, they don't say, oh, that guy's African American. That one's Irish American. They say, he's American. End of story. The only people obsessed with slicing American into tiny little tribes are Americans. Now, if you actually have dual citizenship, fine. You've got a passport from Nigeria and a passport from the U.S. Say you're American and Nigerian. You've got Italian and U.S. citizenship. Say you're both. That's not identity politics. That's paperwork. But if you were born in Cleveland, your parents were born in Detroit, your grandparents were born in Chicago, and your big connection to the motherland is dashiki, you bought on Amazon Prime, you're not African American. You're an American who's never left the time zone. And before someone clips this and screams, racist, let me be crystal clear. I don't care if you're black, white, brown, tan, beige, or whatever shade Sherwin-Williams hasn't named yet. If you're a citizen, you follow the laws, you contribute, you show up when it counts, you're an American. Full stop. No extra adjectives required. The hyphen game is not about pride anymore. It's about politics. Every extra label is an excuse for a politician or a pundit or some DEI consultant to put you in a box and tell you who you're allowed to vote for and what you're allowed to think, and which victim group you supposedly belong to. You're African American, so you vote like this. You're Latino something, so you're supposed to support that. At some point, you're not a citizen anymore. You're just a demographic unit on someone's PowerPoint. You know what would absolutely terrify the political class in D.C.? If every single one of us said, I'm an American. That's it. Now, talk to me like a citizen, not a marketing segment. So, yeah, maybe stop introducing yourself like a racial stock ticker. If you're an American, be an American. If you're not an American, cool. Be proud of where you are from. But let's stop pretending that stacking hyphens makes us deeper, wiser, and more moral. Mostly it just makes us easier to divide. So let me tell you about my favorite 4-hour waste of someone else's time this week. I'm on Facebook, minding my own business, doing what I usually do when somebody posts something and then locks the comments. You know, the type, I'm very brave, here's my hot take, and no one is allowed to reply. Cool. So I just share the post to my own page and reply there. And like clockwork, here comes Captain Original Thought, same script as always. Trump, pedophile, Epstein, on the list, blah, blah, blah. So I hit him with the same question I always ask. If Trump's the Epstein supervillain you say he is, why isn't the cackling dingus then? You had the files. You've leaked dumber stuff than that. We'll wait. One of my conservative friends jumps in, makes a perfectly normal comment, and this guy immediately drops down to playground level. So I step in. Now I'm very comfortable in a debate. I've written, 40 books? I've had every insult thrown at me except you're too quiet. So I ask him straight. Okay, tough guy, if Trump's the monster, why isn't your cackling dingus president on the hook with him? And then he plays the card I was absolutely waiting for. He said, I was a Marine in Fallujah. Of course you were. Everybody online was in Fallujah. Nobody was ever at the motor pool or in the chow line or stuck doing inventory. They were all personally kicking down doors with a GoPro on their soul. Then he sends a picture of himself. I guess this was supposed to intimidate me. Couple of problems. Number one, if you are built like a 5'2" gym goblin, maybe don't lead with the glamour shot. Number two, if you're not old enough to have actually been anywhere near Fallujah when Fallujah was Fallujah, don't tell the guy who fought in Ramadi that you were in Fallujah. We have calendars. We can do math. So at that point, I stopped taking him seriously and start having fun. I just start dropping links to my books, screenshots of a royalty check. Definition of what a royalty is, you could see the rage level go through the screen. Apparently nothing upsets a man with small arms and big delusions like the sentence, "I got paid to write, and you get mad about it for free." His response is pure kindergarten. "I'm going to take your wife. I'm having dinner with your wife tonight. You wish you looked like me." Buddy, my wife likes people who get royalty checks. You want to impress her? Bring a contract, not a selfie. And on top of that, this was all happening in the middle of a weekday. So every time he'd say, "I'm going to take your wife," I just ask, "Why aren't you at work?" Because I was literally outlining another book while copy and pasting the same two replies at him for 4 hours. He thought he was having an intense live intellectual combat. I had a Word document open with my standard replies. Add one line, copy, paste, hit send, go back to the outline. He was my background noise. And then he kept bringing up Grindr, assuming he meant Grindr, also not looking it up. There's a long list of things. I will research for a book. His insult choices are not on that list. My favorite moment, though, he says, "You wish you looked like me." No. Obviously, I'm smarter than you are. So, no, I don't also want to downgrade in looks department to match your selfie. And since he sent the flexing picture, I sent him a copy of my karate book. He's flexing biceps, I'm flexing footnotes. Good-looking people get robbed all the time, man. If you don't have a big brain to go with the big muscles, you're just a well-decorated victim. So here's the point. If you're going to debate me, you need to show up with more than, "I was totally in Fallujah, bro. I'm going to take your wife," and "I have big muscles and a grinder joke." Because if you don't have a statute, a fact, a source, and at least one working brain cell, those muscles are about as useful as a security guard with no flashlight. I spent 4 hours copy-pasting from a Word doc, outlined another book, and he still thinks he owned me. If that's what a win looks like on the loony left these days, I'll let them keep winning all they want. I've got a question for you. How did we go from having the information of the entire world in our pocket to people who are dumber than when we had rotary phones? Yes, I remember rotary phones. You had to stick your finger in the wheel, spin it around, and wait for it to spin back before you could dial the next number. Some of you are dumber than that. Some of you are dumber than banging two rocks together. That's how bad it is. We went from smartphones, high-speed internet, free courses, books, lectures, translation apps, dictionaries, to people who can't get past a 12-second video without their brain buffering. How do you have the Library of Alexandria in your hand and choose to live in the comment section of TikTok? I'll tell you how. You're using the tech the wrong way. You're lazy. You don't want to read. You don't want to write. You don't want to learn. You want to be fed. You want someone else to do the hard work, chew the information for you, spit it back out as a meme, and then you pretend you did research. And here's the ugly part. The people feeding you know you're lazy. They know you won't read a book. They know you won't check a source. They know you won't get past a headline. So they feed you whatever makes them money. Fear, outrage, shock, tribalism. They don't care if it's true. They care if it gets clicks. Because clicks become ad revenue. Ad revenue becomes income. Your ignorance is someone else's business model. So here's the cycle. Step 1, you refuse to read. Books are too long. Articles are too boring. You barely get through a caption. Step 2, you live on short clips, rage bait, and reaction videos. Step 3, creators notice you only respond to the most extreme, loud, nonsense takes. So guess what they do? They go louder, dumber, and more extreme. Step 4, you believe them because checking would mean work. And since you won't do the work, you become the person who confidently repeats the dumbest thing they heard this week. And if it's a PhD thesis, you'll tell me how capitalism works, but you've never looked at a budget. You'll tell me the Constitution says, but you've never read past the first meme about it. You'll scream, war crime, and couldn't quote a single law of armed conflict if your Wi-Fi depended on it. All of this with a supercomputer in your hand. You know what a smartphone really is? It's an amplifier. If you're curious, disciplined, and willing to think, it makes you more powerful. If you're lazy, emotional, and addicted to outrage, it makes you louder and dumber in public. The phone didn't break you, it exposed you. There's a simple test for whether you're using this stuff right. Ask yourself, when was the last time I used my phone to actually learn something, not just to react to something? Not, I watched a guy rant. I read an actual article all the way through. I opened a book. I took notes. I checked a source for myself. I looked up a term I didn't understand instead of just nodding along. If you can't remember, you're not using a smartphone. You're using a very expensive toy to stay comfortably dumb. I'm not saying everybody has to write 40 books, but I am saying this. You have no excuse anymore. You can download entire libraries for free. You can watch lectures from top universities for free. You can learn economics, history, law, languages, theology, all from the same device you're using to argue with strangers in a comment thread. If you choose to stay ignorant in 2025, that's not a lack of opportunity. That's a hobby. So here's my challenge. Next time you're about to type some confident nonsense online, stop and ask, have I read more than a meme on this? Can I name one book, one article, one actual source behind what I'm saying? If the answer is no, maybe don't hit post. Or better yet, go do the thing no one wants to do. Read, think, write, then come back and talk like an adult. We live in a world where you can either be informed or entertained to death. Most people chose door number 2. If you're still listening, you might be one of the weirdos who wants door number 1. Good. That's who this show is for. All right, let's talk about the latest bombshell that wasn't. Democrats decided to drop a batch of photos from the Jeffrey Epstein estate. Lots of breathless headlines, lots of dramatic music, and what did we actually get? Pictures, rich people, at parties, in mansions, grown men with grown women, that's it. No underage victims in the frame, no crimes being committed in the frame, just the same recycled social circle photos we've all seen versions of for years now, repackaged as if they're the Zapruder film. And, of course, front and center in the spin, Donald Trump. Look, see, Trump was around Epstein. Yes, we know. Trump moved in the same New York Palm Beach circles. He went to some of the same parties. He flew on Epstein's plane a few times in the 1990s. None of that is new. None of that is a crime. And the part they always leave out? By Trump's own account, he eventually kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago after repeated complaints that Epstein was targeting staff and young women who worked there. That's the opposite of lifelong best friends. That's a falling out. So the big Democrat reveal boils down to this. Breaking news! Wealthy guy once knew other wealthy guy. Then banned him from his club. Stop the presses. Now let's talk about what these photos do not show. They do not show Trump committing a crime. They do not show Trump with underage girls. They do not show Trump anywhere near the documented abuse that actually put Epstein in prison. The same is true for a lot of the other famous faces in those pictures. You see Trump, you see Bill Clinton, you see tech billionaires, royals, lawyers, professors. You know what you don't see? An indictment attached to the photo, because that's not how evidence works. Standing in the same room as a criminal is not a criminal statute. If it were, half of Washington, D.C. would be under arrest by lunch. Now, every time this Epstein circle comes back around, the same script pops up. The list is coming. Trump is on the list. Any day now, he'll be exposed as a pedophile. We've watched court documents get unsealed. We've seen flight logs. We've seen name after name in black and white. And here's the reality. So far, those documents have not produced a criminal case against Donald Trump for Epstein-related crimes. no indictment, no charges, no conviction. You can hate him, but you can be disgusted that he ever shared a room with Epstein, but that is not the same as proving he was a part of the abuse. And here's the line I always come back to. If Trump were really the secret star of the Epstein files, if there were some smoking gun document sitting in a vault, why isn't the cackling dingus president? They had those files, and they've leaked dumber stuff than that. We'll wait. You can't convince me that the same political machine that leaked transcripts, tax returns, private calls, and classified gossip would suddenly grow a conscience the minute they found a real Epstein-level crime tied to Trump. If they had it, you would have seen it. On a billboard, on a mug, on a t-shirt, on a Senate campaign ad. And notice something else. When a picture surfaces of Trump anywhere near Epstein, it isn't instant hysteria. Proof he's guilty, proof he's a predator. When pictures surface of other powerful people, former presidents, famous philanthropists, billionaires, royalty, suddenly the tone changes. Well, we can't jump to conclusions. We don't know the context. It's just a photograph. Exactly. It is just a photograph. Either that rule applies to everybody or it's just tribal theater. Same thing with the Epstein files conversation. Whole media segments are built on, what if Trump is on the list? But when you bring up the fact that there are ugly contested questions swirling around plenty of other powerful people, including Joe Biden's own family, the room gets very quiet. Look at the Ashley Biden diary mess. Fact checkers now treat the diary itself as likely authentic, based on court filings and her own description. But the interpretations of what it means are still contested and unproven, including the most serious accusations people like to throw around online. So the honest position is this. There are disturbing claims out there. Some involve Trump. Some involve the Bidens. Some involve people you've never heard of. But unless and until these claims turn into real charges with real evidence in a real courtroom, they are claims, not convictions. If that standard is too strict for you when it protects someone you hate, then you don't care about victims or justice. You care about jerseys and hashtags. Quick pause here. If you're listening to this and you actually want to get past memes and headlines and this stuff, this is exactly why I write books. In the Biden crime family, I walk through how influence, access, and money move around powerful families, and what real evidence looks like when you're trying to separate scandal from spin. And from jobs to justice, the Trump era examined, I lay out the Trump years in policy terms, not hashtag terms. What actually changed in law, in regulation, in foreign policy. And in my writings on the loony left, I break down this entire habit of turning every accusation into a foregone conclusion and every court document into a partisan weapon. If you want to dig deeper, the books are there. If you don't read, you can still argue in the comments. Just don't be surprised when somebody with a bookshelf runs circles around you. Back to Epstein. Here's what the latest photo dump actually proves. It proves there was a social circle of elites who were very, very comfortable around a man who was already, at minimum, creepy and ethically radioactive long before the worst allegations went public. It proves our ruling class has terrible judgment about the people they let orbit their lives. It proves that money, access, and private jets will get almost anyone to look the other way until the headlines show up. And then suddenly nobody knew anything. What it does not prove is that every person in every photo is secretly guilty of Epstein's crimes. That is not how due process works. That is not how evidence works. And that is not how a free society is supposed to work. People ask me all the time, Shawn, why do you dive so deep into this? How do you keep track of all the cases, all the documents, all the hypocrisy? It goes back to something a very smart sergeant told me in the Army. He said, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know where to find everything. In uniform, there was a stock answer. I don't know, sir, but I will find out. Then you went and found out. That never left me. Now, when the Epstein files drop, or when Congress plays games with photo dumps, I do the same thing. I don't wait for my favorite pundit to spoon feed me outrage. I go look, I read the documents, I check what they actually say, not what Twitter says they say. Then I put it into books, into courses, into episodes like this, so that when the next wave of hysteria hits, you don't have to start from zero. You've already seen the pattern. By the way, if you've got questions on this, Epstein files, Trump, the courts, any of it, send them in during the week. Drop them in the YouTube comments, hit me on social, and I'll pull some of them for future episodes. If you're wondering about something, I guarantee you're not the only one. So here's where I land. If you want to hold Trump accountable for real things he's actually done, I'm listening. If You want to reform how the rich and powerful use their money, their planes, and their social circles to dodge consequences? I'm listening. But if your whole case is, here's a photo of Trump as a younger man standing next to another rich guy with adult women in the frame, therefore he's a pedophile. That's not justice, that's fan fiction. And if the Epstein files were really the smoking gun that some people desperately want them to be, then we come back to the same question. Why isn't the cackling dingus president? They had those files. They've leaked dumber stuff than that. We'll wait. Until then, I'm going to keep doing what I've always done. Read the documents, follow the law, call out the propaganda, and remind you that truth usually looks a lot less dramatic than the memes designed to keep you angry and stupid. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. This is Shawn Thinking Out Loud. All right, let's talk about something that is going to make a lot of people in Washington, D.C. very nervous. Carl Higbie said the quiet part out loud. If we're serious about fixing this government, some bureaucrats are going to lose their jobs. And I don't care. Neither should you. Because the counties around D.C. and some of the richest in the entire country, not because they discovered a new technology, not because they built the next Apple or Tesla, but because they figured out how to live off your tax bill like it's a permanent trust fund. So when somebody says, hey, maybe a few of these people could actually get real jobs, the professional class clutch their pearls and start dialing congressmen. Carl says he got calls from members of Congress and their staffers. Whoa, you don't understand. This can't be done. That can't be done. Let us explain the process. I know that drill. That's DC talk for please don't tell the peasants how simple some of these cuts really are. Let's walk through the low-hanging fruit. Number 1, codify the cuts that are already on the books. There are spending reductions baked into law that magically disappear every time a new budget gets written. Lock those in right off the top. That's 10 or hundreds of billions without even touching the big-ticket entitlements. Then we get to the fun stuff. National Endowment for the Arts, roughly $200 million, about 150 staff. Tell me why the federal government needs to decide which art is worthy of your paycheck. I'm an author. I create content. You know how my art gets funded? Somebody buys a book. That's it. If nobody buys Bloodstained Banner or Dismantling the Republic, I don't call Washington and demand a bailout. Art that can't survive without federal grant probably doesn't need to be force-funded by a single mom in Iowa who's already paying more on groceries and gas because the same government can't balance a checkbook. National Endowment for the Humanities. Same thing. $200 million for white papers and panel discussions no normal citizen will ever read. Carl used the perfect line. These agencies are about as useful as nipples on a bull. Then you've got the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. That name alone sounds like a place where ideas go to retire. What do? Write reports about reports that recommend more reports? Meanwhile, places like Detroit, Baltimore, and half of rural America look like we lost a war and forgot to tell anyone. If you want to fund development, maybe try developing the country that's actually paying the bill. And that's just the small stuff. Hundreds of little alphabet agencies, each burning 100 to 200 million a year, all living on autopilot. Legacy programs nobody remembers creating, but everyone insists we can't possibly cut. Zero them out. Now, let's talk about the big dog, the Department of Education. Every Republican runs on this. Yeah, it's terrible. We're going to shut it down. Local control, parents' rights, yada, yada. Then they get to D.C., sit on a committee, meet a lobbyist, and suddenly it's, well, obviously we can't really eliminate it. $230+ billion. Not one classroom, not one teacher, not one kid who can point to that building and say, yep, that's why I can read. Since the Department of Education came into existence, test scores have gone down, basic literacy and numeracy have gone down, discipline has gone down. The only thing that went up is the number of bureaucrats writing guidance documents telling your school district how to do everything except teach. If you want the long-form version of this, that's literally why I wrote Understanding Capitalism and Dismantling the Republic. We turned education from a local responsibility into a federal jobs program with worse results for more money. And then Carl hits Noah. $7 billion for a weather bureaucracy that made sense in the 1970s when your forecast was a guy with a map and a marker. Today, your watch, your phone, and 3 private apps can tell you rain is coming in 8 minutes down to the street. Do we need some core federal capability for aviation and defense? Yes. Do we need layers of bureaucracy, offices, and climate communication teams to tell me it's hot in July? No. And this is where I absolutely agree with the sentiment in that clip. We can cut whatever we want. That is what the Constitution actually says. Congress controls the purse. If they had the spine, they could wake up tomorrow and say, these agencies are done. Appropriation 0. Everyone go home. No slow winding down. No, we'll look at this over 10 years. Flip the switch. But they don't, because every one of those agencies comes with a lobby, a contractor, a congressional district, and a donor. So they call people like Carl and people like me to explain why the thing that sounds simple is complicated and can't be done. No. What's complicated is pretending we can run an empire of pointless offices on a maxed out national credit card forever. What's simple is admitting that if an agency doesn't protect the border, deliver mail, defend the country, or enforce basic law, it's probably optional. So here's my challenge to every Republican who says they love this country and want to be fiscally conservative. Pick a list. Start with the ones even your voters have never heard of. National Endowment for the Arts. National Endowment for the Humanities. Woodrow Wilson Center. African Development Foundation. Half of the bureaucratic barnacles attached to the Department of Education. Whatever. Zero them out. Put the savings on one page. Show the American people what you actually cut, not what you meant to cut over the next 30 years. Until then, spare me the speeches. If you want to dive deeper into how we got this bloated administrative state and why it's hollowing out the Republic from the inside, go check out Dismantling the Republic, the role of progressive elites in America's descent into tribalism. The book is basically one long indictment of exactly the nonsense Carl is pointing at. And as always, if you've got questions about this, or if you want to nominate your favorite useless federal agency for the Nipples on a Bull Award, send them in during the week. I read them, I pull them into the show, and sometimes they become the next episode. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. You're watching Shawn Thinking Out Loud.
I ruffled a lot of feathers down in D.C. I got a few calls actually, from congressmen or their staffers, and they were all trying to explain to me like, oh, why this can or can't be done. So I know they're watching, but here's just a few ideas. And look, this is coming from a place, honestly, I actually want to help. I hate criticizing my own party, but someone's got to if they're screwing it up. Look, there's going to be a massive bunch of pain for a bunch of bureaucrats who end up getting fired. There always is. But considering the surrounding counties of Washington, D.C. are some of the wealthiest in the country, I really just don't care at this point. Let's look at some of the low-hanging fruit. You could just codify all the DOGE cuts. Take that right off the top of any budget, like a couple $100 billion right there. Then you got places like the National Endowments for the Arts, $207 million with 150 staff. Zero reason the government should be funding art programs and things like that. Nothing. And what's great about this, there's no turnover, there's no winding down, it's just an immediate cut, everybody go home, sell the building. You got the National Endowment for Humanities. I'd never even heard of this. It's the same thing, another $200 million organization. There's a ton of these, hundreds of these little agencies in the $100 to $200 million that are about as useful as nipples on a bull. Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, what the hell is that? They just give money to write white papers about stuff. African Development Foundation. How about we use that money to fund and develop Detroit? There's a dozen more of these stupid agencies with programs that are legacy and billions of dollars that do nothing for taxpayers. So just zero them out. But I want to get to some big stuff here. The Department of Education. Everybody who runs is yeah, this is great, it's bad, we got to do this. A lot of folks on Capitol Hill right now promised that they would get rid of this. Donald Trump did too. There's $238 billion. Now we're talking. They don't employ one active teacher. And since their inception, our kids have gotten like marketably dumber, okay? Test scores are in the toilet. NOAA, here's another one, folks. This is the weather group, okay? $7 billion or so for this. Look, this might have been needed in the 70s when it was created, but now we have more advanced weather on like our watches, on our iPhones, provided by private companies. We don't need NOAA anymore. Oh, Carl, we can't cut that. Yes, we can. We can cut whatever we want.
All right, tonight I want to talk straight to the young men, because a lot of you look at marriage in 2025 and think, there is no upside for me. I get why you feel that way. Let me walk you through the script far too many guys are living. You meet a woman, she's fun, she's pretty, she laughs at your jokes, and everybody around you says, bro, lock that down. You get married. Overnight, your life becomes a bill-paying machine. Rent, you pay it. Car insurance, phone, streaming services, nails, lashes, girls, trips, emergencies, Amazon packages, you pay it. And every time you bring up money, you get some version of, you're so lucky to have me. You're in debt up to your eyeballs, but apparently you're lucky. You're working extra shifts. She's working on her social media. You're exhausted. She's exhausted from telling you how you're not doing enough. Then one day she decides she's unhappy. Not, we have problems, let's fix them. Just, I deserve to be happy, and this isn't serving me. Now it's lawyer time. Suddenly, the same system that told you to man up and pay for everything looks at you and says, sir, you will continue paying for everything, plus some. Alimony, child support, maybe the house, maybe half the retirement you haven't even built yet. She walks away with cash, prizes, and a storyline. I had to leave. He only did the bare minimum. Meanwhile, you're sitting there looking at the receipts, the overtime, the years, thinking, if that was the bare minimum, what does maximum look like? Selling organs? Now, quick pause. Not every woman is like that. There are women who build with you, sacrifice with you, and would rather grow something real than chase lifestyle points on Instagram. They exist. I married one of the good ones. But the culture and the legal system tilt hard in a direction that says men pay by default. Men are at fault by default. Men are responsible by default. And incentives matter. I talk about this all the time in my books, especially understanding capitalism, the dynamic dance of market forces, and human behavior, and Bloodstained Banner, Socialism, Capitalism, and the Myth of the Nordic Model. Different topic, same principle. When you reward certain behavior, you get more of it. When you punish certain behavior, you get less of it. Right now, we've built a system that rewards bailing out of a marriage with cash and sympathy, punishes men who are actually trying to be providers, and tells young guys, if it all blows up, don't worry, you'll be fine, while the numbers say the opposite. So when a young man looks at that and says, why on earth would I sign up for this? That's not hatred, that's risk assessment. What I'm telling you to do, I'm not saying never marry. I'm saying stop walking into a legal contract with life-altering consequences like you're signing a gym membership. If you're a young man, hear me. Do not marry a woman whose main skill is spending your money. Do not marry someone who talks more about what I deserve than what we are going to build. Do not marry into chaos, debt, and drama and then act shocked when the judge doesn't care about your feelings. If you're going to marry at all, get a prenup. Get actual legal advice, and make sure your future wife is as serious about duty and loyalty as she is about wedding photos. Because the court doesn't know how in love you were. The court knows what's on paper. And if you want to understand how systems and incentives get twisted in everything from economics to family law, go check out my Super Gringo books catalog. Dismantling the Republic, Understanding Capitalism, Bloodstained Banner, and the rest, all on Amazon and Google Play. Those books came out of the same mindset I'm talking about right now. Ask hard questions first. Don't wait to get blindsided later. Young men, your time, your money, and your future are not consolation prizes on a game show. Don't hand them over to someone who treats you like an ATM with legs. Be smart, be careful, and if you still decide to put on that ring, do it with your eyes wide open. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. You're watching Shawn Thinking Out Loud. All right. I want to talk about two things that are hard. I'm going to start with something very simple. Two communities are in shock. Families are getting phone calls they should never get. Classmates and friends are sitting in hospital waiting rooms wondering if the people they love are going to make it. In the last 24 hours, At Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, a man in black walked into an engineering building during an exam review. 2 students killed, 9 others hurt, some of them in critical condition. At Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia, during a public Hanukkah event, Hanukkah by the Sea, at least 7 people killed, including one of the shooters, and 29 wounded. 2 of those are police officers. Australian authorities are calling that attack what it is, a terrorist incident targeting people gathered to celebrate a Jewish holiday. I want you to hear this clearly. Before we talk politics, before we argue, before anyone posts their hot take, real human beings are dead. They are not examples. They are not props. They are not a point for your side. They had names. They had families. They had plans for next week. So if you're watching this and your first instinct is, how do I use this to dunk on the people I hate? You're part of the problem. Now, because I know how this goes, let me cut off the first wave of lazy takes right now. The script is predictable. This is why we need more gun control. This only happens in America. If we just passed one more law, this would all stop. Except in the same 24-hour window, you have a campus shooting in the United States where guns are already banned on campus, and every policy under the sun says you can't bring that here. And a mass casualty terrorist attack in Australia, one of the most gun-controlled countries on earth. You cannot, with a straight face, look at Bondi Beach and say, see, if we just had Australia's laws, this would all go away. Australia has licensing, registration, strict storage rules, heavy restrictions on the types of firearms allowed, and they still just had an attack that left 11 dead and 29 wounded at a public religious event. So no, the problem is not as simple as America bad, gun law good. What you're seeing in both cases is this: a determined attacker, soft, exposed human targets, a system that reacts after the shooting starts, different countries, different laws, same pattern. At Brown University, we don't even have all the facts yet. The shooter is still at large. We don't know the motive, we don't know the full timeline, and we don't know what red flags were missed. That alone is a good reason not to jump on TV 15 minutes later and announce, if only my favorite bill had passed, none of this would have happened. At Bondi, police are already calling it terrorism, a Jewish holiday, a public, open event, heavily gun-controlled country, and still someone motivated by whatever ideology decided to turn that storyline into a killing field. That should tell you something. Evil does not check the statute book before it acts. It looks for soft targets, crowds, slow response, and maximum impact. If all we do after every tragedy is scream guns for a week, then move on, we're not serious. Serious would look like this: asking what we missed in vetting, intelligence, or prior behavior. Asking why campuses and event spaces are still wide open and unprotected while we spend fortunes on everything but security. Ask why known threats slip through while ordinary people get treated like the problem. Serious would mean acknowledging you can pass every gun law you dream of and still have terrorists, fanatics, and broken people who will find a way to hurt others if they're determined enough. That doesn't mean do nothing. It means do the things right. Do the right to some things. Harden vulnerable targets. Take repeat violent offenders seriously. Treat openly expressed violence intent like the alarm it is, not just edgy posting, and stop pretending we can legislate the human heart. If your only plan is ban something and call it a day, you don't have a plan. So here's where I land on nights like this. We start with respect for the dead, respect for the wounded, respect for the families who are going to be planning funerals instead of holidays. We refuse to turn them into hashtags for a pre-written agenda. We tell the truth. The U.S. has a violence problem that is deeper than one law or one gun. The rest of the world is not magically safe because of one policy either. Just ask the people at Bondi Beach. And every time we make this conversation about scoring political points instead of confronting evil, security, and responsibility, we guarantee we'll be back here again. If you're grieving, I'm not here to debate you. If you're genuinely scared and looking for answers, I get it. But if you're already drafting the tweet that starts with, see, this proves my side was right all along, before the crime scene tape is even down, you're not solving anything. You're just using other people's trauma as fuel. We can do better than that. We owe these victims better than that. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. You're watching Shawn Thinking Out Loud. All right, that's where I'm going to land it for today. If anything I said raised questions for you about Trump, Epstein files, socialism, government waste, mass shootings, marriage, or what life is actually like out here in Ariquemes, Rondônia, send your questions in during the week. Drop them in the YouTube comments, throw them at me on social, and I'll pull as many as I can into future episodes of Shawn Thinking Out Loud. If you want to go deeper than a podcast episode and actually see the receipts, that's what the books are for. You can find my work as Super Gringo Books on Amazon and Google Play. Bloodstained Banner, Socialism, Capitalism, and the Myth of the Nordic Model. Dismantling the Republic, the role of progressive elites in America's descent into tribalism. From Jobs to Justice, the Trump era examined. Understanding Capitalism, the dynamic dance of market forces and human behavior, and a whole shelf of others. If you don't read, you can stay in the comments. If you do read, you'll have ammo for the next argument. Before you go, do the usual, like, subscribe, comment, think, not just react, think. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. Thanks for hanging out with me. This has been Shawn Thinking Out Loud. I'll see you on the next episode.
Welcome to the noise in my head, where ideas spark like lightning threads. No script, no map, just let it flow. Thinking out loud, let's see where we go. Welcome to the noise in my head, where ideas spark like lightning threads. No script, no